Mute button. Hi. Welcome, everyone. I know I am an hour late, an hour and 19 minutes late. But yeah, let's get into it because, it is a geeky birthday. And I've just been watching Bridgerton because this afternoon I worked my ass off. And yeah, I had a little bit of a bad client with the spicy stuff. So, and you know what bad clients in that side of the world look like. So it was kind of triggering. So I decided, you know what? Fuck everything. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to carry on watching Bridgerton. And so I did. And I delayed the reading because I can. Yeah, I'll tell you about it, Cole. It was bad. So we are on part 4 of chapter 1 of Orientalism. And I got myself the audiobook. So what I've been doing with Inglorious Empire by Edward Saïd, I've decided to do with Orientalism. So the Orientalism readings are going to be held pretty much Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday during the day, Friday during the day. It can be at any time. I'll just let you guys know. What I will do is I will set up the audiobook instead of me reading. Thank you. Everybody should be sending you gifts, Geeky. Not you sending me. So I will set up the audiobook. So while I'm working elsewhere on other stuff, we will listen to the audiobook. So we will be able to get through this book faster. Because, yeah, we're only on chapter 1. Look at this. That's how much we have to get through. We are only on chapter 1. So, yeah, I think, I don't know where my other glasses are. Okay, well, I'm going to be wearing the ridiculous glasses for now. Yes, they are ridiculous. Thank you. Yes, the glasses are ridiculous. So, what we've been talking about is the West's idea of going into the Orient, getting this power to control the Oriental narrative, especially through Egypt, and dispel what they saw as the threat of Islam. Thank you, Rosie. And so now we get to what Saïd calls crisis. It may appear strange to speak about something or someone as holding a textual attitude, but a student of literature will understand the phrase more easily if he will recall the kind of view attacked by Voltaire in Candide, or even the attitude to reality satirized by Cervantes in Don Quixote. What seems unexceptionable, good sense, to these writers is a fallacy to assume that the swarming, unpredictable, and problematic mess in which humans beings live can be understood on the basis of what books, text, to say, to apply what one learns out of a book, literally, to risk folly or ruin. Yeah. Do you base entire relationships on what a person reads? Or how they've understood it? Some people do. And it's silly. Because, yes, everybody I know has read, just say, The Hobbit or Harry Potter. Can I judge them on that? No. If you still support J.K. Rowling, that is what I'm going to judge you on. Most leftists I know have read, what's her name, Ayn Rand. what's that book? That fucking one that I used as a doorstop because that's all it's worth. Atlas Shrugged. I also read The Fountainhead. Both of those absolutely fantastically useless books. Ayn Rand, in fact, I wouldn't even use her books as a doorstop. I would use her as a doorstop. Terrible writer and defender of capitalism. Every leftist I know has read Ayn Rand. Am I going to judge them on that? The fact that they've read her? No. I don't even judge communists on whether they read the Communist Manifesto. If you are a communist and you haven't read the Communist Manifesto, it's perfectly fine. I don't care. As long as what you're fighting for is the right thing. But a lot of the West, and this is colonial, pre-colonial, and obviously colonial West, the West in general, places a lot of emphasis on what you consume and not why you consume it or how. One would think no more of using Amandiz of Gaul to understand 16th century or present century Spain than one would use the Bible to understand, say, the House of Commons. But clearly, people have tried to use texts in so simple-minded a way, for otherwise Candide and Don Quixote would not still have the appeal for readers that they do today. Don Quixote is not a very good text, just by the way. It seems a common human failing to prefer the schematic authority of a text to the disorientations or direct encounters with the human. Yeah, because instead of wanting to understand Black history, what happened in 2020 was people went out and bought Angela Davis. Promptly, I'm talking about white people, promptly put the book on their bookshelves, maybe read a couple of pages of Freedom is a Constant Struggle, put it down, put it on their bookshelf to be said, I am trying to understand Black people, instead of going out and actually talking to people. It's what empire has always done. It has always tried to make sense of the world through its own lens and its own understanding of texts rather than listening to the lived experiences of people. But this is a failing constantly present. Or are there circumstances that, more than others, make the textual attitude more likely to prevail? And yes, I'm going to interject again here. The reason that India was unable to be Christianized was because of texts. Because Hinduism was already written. Yeah. Hinduism was already written, so people, the people who tried to Christianize India failed because they had more respect for written text than they did for the people. Two situations favor a textual attitude. One is when a human confronts at close quarters something relatively unknown and threatening and previously distant. In such a case, one has recourse not only to what in one's previous experience the novelty resembles, but also to what one has read about it. Travel books or guidebooks are about as natural a kind of text, as logical in their composition and in their use, as any book that one can think of, precisely because of this human tendency to fall back on a text when the uncertainties of travel and strange paths seem to threaten one's equanimity. We have a tendency to fall back on what we know. Yes, it's comforting. It's comforting because that's what Moth, you are going to die if you encounter one of my cats. We fall back on what we know. And yeah, sometimes it is a text. But instead of asking somebody for directions, you'd rather look at a map. A map that has 3 dead ends and is 20 years out of date. Maybe we shouldn't look at the map when there's somebody right there to actually tell us, hey, you know this town better than this map does. What can you tell me? Tell me how to find City Hall. Or we try to make sense of something through a text rather than people's lived experiences. Or we try to make sense of something through what somebody who looks like us tells us, rather than the lived experience of those who don't look like us. And that is why police believe white people. Thank you. Many travelers find themselves saying of an experience in a new country that wasn't what they expected, meaning it isn't what the book said. And of course, many writers of travel books or guidebooks compose them in order to say what a country is like this or better, colorful, expensive, interesting, and so forth. The idea in either case is that people, places, and experiences can always be described by a book so much that the book or text acquires a greater authority and use than the actuality it describes. Thank you so much, Mia. The comedy of Fabrice de Del Dongo's search for the Battle of Waterloo is not so much that he fails to find the battle, but he looks for it as something texts have told him about. A second situation favoring the textual attitude is the appearance of success. If one reads a book claiming that lions are fierce and encounters a fierce lion, I simplify of course, the chances are that one will be encouraged to read more books by that same author and believe them. But if, in addition, the lion book instructs one how to deal with a fierce lion and the instructions work, then not only will the author be greatly believed, he will be impelled to try his hand at other kinds of written performances. And I like that he calls it written performance. Thank you. I like that he calls it written performance because writing and the living text. Okay, let me explain the concept of a living text. This book is dead wood. It is pulp. It is nothing until I pick it up and make sense of it. Things only exist in relation to how we use them in a human-centric world. So if you have a book and you're not reading it, the book is not a book, it's a paperweight. And when we pick up that book, it is the author performing their truth or reality or story again and again and again through how it plays out. And we are performing the act of consuming. So why I say performance. It is a written performance of a reality that other people either do not know of or want to know more about, or know something and want to expand their knowledge or understand how this author describes it. There is a rather complex dialectic of reinforcement by which the experience of readers in reality are determined by what they have read, and this in turn influences writers to take up subjects defined in advance by readers' experiences, or I would say expectations. A book on how to handle a fierce lion might then cause a series of books to be produced on such subjects as the fierceness of lions, the origins of fierceness, and so forth. Similarly, as the focus of the text centers more narrowly on the subject, no longer lions but their fierceness, we may expect the ways in which it is recommended that a lion's fierceness be handled will increase its fierceness. Ooh, force it to be fierce. since that is what it is. And that is what, in essence, we know or can only know about it. So, when an authority speaks on something, why do people think that Hamas is a terrorist group? Are they a terrorist group? Exactly. Told by people in positions of authority. And one of the reasons that we continue to see the spin of Hamas as a terrorist group is because they have to maintain that narrative. The narrative has to be maintained in order for the story to be real, in order for the purpose of that story to be real, for that, for all of the authority, for the authority who said it to constantly be believed. You know, when you were a kid and you told a lie? Yep. In order to continue justifying their authority as well. It's also cyclical in that they are the authority, they said this. In order for them to continue being authority, they have to maintain this through that. So that authority kind of narrative becomes cyclical. Yeah, remember when you told a lie as a kid? What did you do to make sure that that lie was completely 100% believed? We told more lies. Thank you. There were more lies in that lie to support that lie. I didn't go to the arcade with my friend. I absolutely did not go to the arcade to play Pac-Man with my friend after school when I was supposed to be doing homework. I was doing homework in her room. And we were listening to this song on this radio station. And you know what her brother said? And the lie continues, so that you maintain your innocence. This is just on a greater scale. And to all my non-South African friends, what I'm eating now is a chocolate called Flake. Oh, thank you. It's flaky. Usually crumble it over cakes or ice cream. And so when we maintain that lie, or when we maintain a certain representation of something, it doesn't always have to be a lie. When we maintain a representation of something, it no longer becomes about the thing itself, it becomes about the representation thereof. It no longer becomes about the lion, it becomes about the lion's ferocity. And it becomes then the thing that we know about it. In actual fact, lions are not fierce. Lions are fucking lazy. They sleep more than 20 hours a day. The lionesses hunt for maybe 1 or 2 hours. And the males just sit around and fuck and eat. And the females hunt and take care of the young Well, actually, the entire pride does. But they sleep 20 hours a day. Thank you. Lions are not fierce. They're lazy. But because we know that lions are fierce, through everything that we've read about lions, everything that has been represented about lions, through every bit of literature that we've ever consumed, lions are fierce. And somebody who comes and tells you that lions are lazy will be disbelieved and laughed at. Just like somebody telling you that Hamas is not a terrorist group, Hamas is a resistance group, will be discarded as untrustworthy or terrorist sympathizing, because all they know about Hamas is that it's a terrorist group. The text purporting a certain knowledge about something actual and arising out of circumstances similar to the ones I've just described is not easily dismissed. Expertise is attributed to it. The authority of academics, institutions, and governments can accrue to it, surrounding with it greater prestige than practical successes warrant. Most important, texts can create not only knowledge, but the very reality they appear to describe. In time, such knowledge and reality produce tradition, or what Foucault calls discourse, whose material presence or weight, not the originality of a given author, is really responsible for the text produced out of it. The kind of text is composed out of those pre-existing units of information deposited by Flaubert in the catalogue Idées Rescuées. And the reproduction of ideas can only come from the discourse that already exists. If somebody posits an entirely new idea, they're called crazy. In light of all of this, consider Napoleon and de Lesseps. Everything they knew, more or less, about the Orient came from books written in the tradition of Orientalism, placed in the library of Idées Rescuées. For them, the Orient, like the fierce lion, was something to be encountered and dealt with to a certain extent, because the text made that Orient possible. Such an Orient was silent, available to Europe for the realization of projects that involved but were never directly responsible to the native inhabitants. Thank you. And unable to resist the projects, images or mere descriptions devised for it. I call such a relation between Western writing and consequences the Oriental silence, the result of and the sign of the West's great cultural strength, its will to power over the Orient. But there is another side to the strength, a side whose existence depends on the pressures of the Orientalist tradition and textual attitude toward the Orient. This side lives its own life, as books about fierce lions will do until lions can talk back. I like that. There's an African proverb that basically states, history will always remember the side of the hunter until the lion can speak. The perspective really drawn on Napoleon and de Lesseps, to take two among the many projectors who hatched plans for the Orient, is one that sees them carrying on the dimensionless silence of the Orient, mainly because the discourse of Orientalism, over and above the Orient's powerlessness to do anything about them, suffused their activity with meaning, intelligibility, and reality, because they only believe their own. They really only believe their own when they're talking about something that they understand. Of course, who's going to believe an Egyptian when they talk about Egypt? You have to believe the white man when he talks about Egypt, because the Egyptian doesn't know Egypt as well as the white man. Or, should I say, in your frame of reference. The discourse of Orientalism is what made it possible, in Napoleon's case, a West far more powerful militarily than the Orient, gave them Orientals who can be described as in the description, and an Orient that could cut across as Lisette cut across the Suez. Orientalism gave them their success, at least from their point of view, which had nothing to do with that of the Oriental. Success, in other words, had all the actual human interchange between Oriental and Westerner of the judges, said I to myself, said I, in trial by jury. Once we begin to think of Orientalism as a kind of Western projection onto and will to govern over the Orient, we will encounter a few surprises. For it's true that historians like Michelet, Ranke, Tocqueville, Burckhardt plot their narratives as a story of a particular kind. So these glasses, I found these on sale. I buy direct. Sorry, I had to block someone. The same is also true of Orientalists who plotted Oriental history, character, and destiny for hundreds of years. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the Orientalists became more serious because by then the reaches of imaginative and actual geography had shrunk, because the Oriental-European relationship was determined by an unstoppable European expansion in search of markets, resources, and colonies. And finally, because Orientalism had accomplished its self-metamorphosis from scholarly discourse to imperial institution. Evidence of this metamorphosis is already apparent in what I have said of Napoleon, de Lesseps, Balfour, and Cromer. Their projects in the Orient are understandable on only the most rudimentary level as the efforts of men of vision and genius, heroes in Carlyle's sense. In fact, Napoleon, de Lesseps, Cromer, and Balfour are regular, far less unusual. If we recall the schemata of Herbelot and Dante and add them to both a modernized, efficient engine like the 19th century European empire and a positive twist, since one cannot ontologically obliterate the Orient. One does not have the means to capture it, treat it, describe it, improve it, and radically alter it. The point I'm trying to make here is that the transition from textual apprehension, formulation, or definition of the Orient to the putting all of this into practice in the Orient did take place, and that Orientalism had much to do with it. If I may use the word in a literal sense, preposterous transactions. So far as its strictly scholarly work was concerned, and I find the idea of strict scholarly work as disinteresting and abstract to understand, still, we can allow it intellectually. Orientalism did a great many things. During its great age in the 19th century, it produced scholars, increased the number of languages taught in the West, and the quantity of manuscripts edited, translated, and commented on, and in many cases, it provided the Orient with sympathetic European students, genuinely interested in matters such as Sanskriti grammar, Phoenician numismatics, and Arabic poetry. And yet here we must be very clear. Orientalism overrode the Orient. Because it was written... Oh! That is amazing tarot. Okay. Somebody who is in the YouTube chat said that they're going to get to see the Northern Lights today. That is amazing. Please do not wave at the Northern Lights because that is apparently disrespectful according to some cultures. But tell them I said hi. As a system of thought about the Orient, it always rose from the specifically human detail to the general Tanishman one, in observation about a 10th century Arab poet multiplied into policy toward and about Oriental mentality in Egypt, Iraq, and Arabia, what they called Arabia. I know, and I'm just so sad that I'm not there because I was supposed to. That would be amazing, Taro. I saw them once, and we were just on the border of Norway and Finland when we saw the Northern Lights, and it was phenomenal. It was March 2020, just before the world shut down. Similarly, a verse from the Quran would be considered the best evidence of an ineradicable Muslim sensuality. Orientalism assumed an unchanging Orient, absolutely different. The reasons change from epoch to epoch from the West. And Orientalism in its post-18th century form could never revise itself. All this makes Cromer and Balfour, as observers and administrators of the Orient, inevitable. Beautiful, Taro. Enjoy. They're quite something. And knowing the science behind it doesn't take away the magic. Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite writers of all time. If you don't know Terry Pratchett, please go look up Discworld, D-I-S-C World, the Discworld novels. The Discworld novels informed a lot of my fantasy writing and understanding of the world, especially politics. And Pratchett, I can't even remember where, said, "The birthday person has entered the chat. Happy birthday!" In one of his books, he said, "It's still magic even when you know how it's done." The inevitability that was written into the West and how the West conducts itself or conducted itself throughout history. Just, it makes me realize that if you had to look at Thanos from a colonizational point of view, Thanos is Britain. And I want to write a paper on this. Why is Thanos Britain? The closeness between politics and Orientalism, or to put it more circumspectly, the likelihood that ideas about the Orient drawn from Orientalism can be put into political use, is an important yet extremely sensitive truth. It raises questions about the disposition towards innocence or guilt, scholarly disinterest or pressure group complicity, such as in fields as Black women's studies. It necessarily provokes unrest in one's conscious about cultural, racial, or historical generalizations, their uses, value, degree of objectivity, and fundamental intent. When I interviewed that asswipe from the International Association of Genocide Scholars, the inevitability in his head was that the West is always objective. And if you listen to the episode once I have it edited fully, you'll understand why I say it. More than anything else, the political and cultural circumstances in which Western Orientalism has flourished draw attention to the debased position of the Orient or Oriental as an object of study. Can any other than a political master-slave relation produce the Orientalized Orient perfectly characterized by Anwar Abdel Malik? A. On the level of the position of the problem and the problematic, the Orient and Orientals are considered by Orientalism as an object of study stamped with otherness, all that is different, whether it be subject or object, but a constitutive otherness of an essentialist character. The object of the study would be, as customary, passive, non-participating, endowed with historical subjectivity, and above all, non-active, non-autonomous, non-sovereign with regard to itself. The only Orient or Oriental subject which could be admitted at the extreme limit is the alienated being, philosophically, that is, other than itself in the relationship to itself, posed, understood, defined, and acted on by others. Yeah. From a theist point of view, how God did it. Existence is absurd and incredible. Oh no. Things like this, commentary such as this, makes a reading of something this dense possible. B. Okay, for those of you on other platforms, B's joke on TikTok right now. Steve Jobs would have made a better president than Donald Trump, but that's comparing apples to oranges. B. To the gulag. The subject is always the active participant, is always the white person. And we see it in narratives like the white savior. The white savior narrative is a classic example of we need to tell your story and it needs to be told through our frame of reference so that your story can be understood. The audience has to go through us first before it goes through you, before your story can be understood, because your story is too complex and too rigid and too fixed in whatever it is over there to be understood. I also cackled. I cackled on the inside. B, what do you call it when an undocumented migrant and a Catholic priest get into a fight? Alien versus Predator. I know, it's awful. That is why the white savior narrative survives today. It's because your story is too difficult for us to understand, so we have to mediate it. On the level of the thematic, the Orientalists adopt an essentialist conception of the countries, nations, and peoples of the Orient under study, a conception which expresses itself through characterized ethnist typology, and will soon proceed with it toward racism. I know. It is awful. It is a terrible joke. Thank you. And that ethnist typology always falls down that slippery slope towards racism. It is the basis of racism, of how it is justified that people other the people of whatever area they're trying to dominate. Thank you. According to the traditional Orientalists, an essence should exist, sometimes even clearly described in metaphysical terms, constituting the inalienable and common basis of all beings considered. This essence is both historical, since a fixed point. A Muslim is always a terrorist in the eyes of the West. Always. Always has been, and thus always will be. Constitution. The object of the study, within its inalienable and non-evolutionative specificity, instead of defining it as all other being, states, nations, peoples, cultures, as a product, a result of the vection of forces operating it in the field of historical evolution. The East cannot evolve because the West says so. Thus, one ends up with the typology based on a real specificity, but detached from history, and consequently conceived as being intangible, essential, which makes the studied object another being with regard to whom the studying subject is transcendent. Yes. Absolutely. We will have Homo sinensis, Homo arabicus. And why not Homo Egyptius, Homo africanus? The man, the normal man, is understood being the European man of historical period since Greek antiquity. One sees how much from the 18th to 20th century the hegemonism of possessing minorities, unveiled by Marx and Engels, and the anthropocentrism dismantled by Freud, are accompanied by Eurocentrism, the idea of human and social sciences, and more particularly in direct relationship with non-European peoples. So this is Abdel Malik's work. Anwar Abdel Malik did a lot of good critique on Orientals and Orientalism as a field of study. But of course, his work was ignored because it was in a time where people didn't want to hear his truth. So what I'm going to do now is Abdel Malik. Try to find it, to put it in the server. Oh, please tell me it's... Because he wrote a paper called Orientalism in Crisis. And... damn it! If anybody is registered with the university, please download it from your library. Because I cannot access it. Or let me see if I can find it on Anna's archive. So how is everybody? Nope, not on Anna's archive. If anybody is with the university, please, please, please get that paper for me. It is called Orientalism in Crisis. And if you can download it and send it to me on Discord, that would be great. Because knowledge is power. Abdel Malik sees Orientalism as having a history which, according to the Oriental of the late 20th century, led to the impasse described above. Let us now briefly outline that history as it proceeded through the 19th century to accumulate weight and power. The hegemonism of possessing minorities and anthropocentrism in alliance with Eurocentrism. From the last decades of the 18th century, and for at least a century and a half, Britain and France dominated Orientalism as a discipline. The great philological discoveries in comparative grammar made by Jones, Franz Bopp, Jacob Grimm, and others were originally indebted to manuscripts brought from the East to Paris and London. Almost without exception, every Orientalist began his career as a philologist, and the revolution in philology that produced Bopp, Sayce, Burnouf, and their students was a comparative science based on the premise that languages belong to families, of which the Indo-European and Semitic are the two great instances. From the outset, Orientalism carried forward two traits. One, a newly found scientific self-consciousness based on linguistic importance of the Orient to Europe. And two, proclivity to divide, subdivide, and redivide its subject matter without ever changing its mind about the Orient as being always the same, unchanging, uniform, and a radically peculiar object. Any questions? Hi, Amanda. Friedrich Schlegel, who learned his Sanskrit in Paris, illustrates these traits together. Although by the time he published his Über die Sprache in 1808, Schlegel had practically renounced his Orientalism, he still held that Sanskrit and Persian on the one hand and Greek and German on the other had more affinities with each other than with Semitic, Chinese, American, or African languages. The Indo-European family was artistically simple and satisfactory in a way that the Semitic, for one, was not. Such abstractions in this did not trouble Schlegel, for whom nations, races, minds, and peoples, as things, one could talk about passionately, if in the ever-narrowing perspective of populism, held a lifelong fascination. Yet nowhere does Schlegel talk about the living, contemporary Orient. When he said in 1800, "It is the Orient that we must search for the highest romanticism," he meant the Orient of the Shakuntala, the Zend-Avesta, the Upanishads, and for the Semites, whose language was agglutinative, unaesthetic, and mechanical, they were different, inferior, backward. And this is rooted in racism. Oh, B. B is asking if you had a half okay sleep, Geeky. Also, hi Raven, no worries. I thought you were Amanda for a second. The idea that the Semitic languages are guttural, which is a phrase that I heard while growing up. The guttural phrasing of the Semitic languages of Arabic, ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, all the Levantine languages, the languages of Sham, the Shami languages, all of it was rooted in racism, and particularly anti-Jewish anti-Semitism and anti-Arabic and Islamophobic anti-Semitism. But that is another story for another day. Schlegel's lectures on language and his own life, history, and literature are full of these discriminations, which he made without the slightest qualification. Hebrew, he said, was made for prophetic utterances and divination. The Muslims, however, espoused dead empty theism, merely negative Unitarian faith. So, of course, it was rooted in racism. Much of the racism in Schlegel's strictures upon the Semites and other quote-unquote low Orientals was widely diffused in European culture and still is today. But nowhere else, unless it be the later in the 19th century among Darwinian anthropologists and phrenologists, was it made the basis of scientific subject matter, as it was in comparative linguistics or philology. They used these theorists to justify racism, to justify anti-Semitism, to justify fucking war. All of this was used to manufacture consent for invasion. Ultimately, it is the people of the Orient who suffered the most from all of this misunderstanding of what the Orient was. Because ultimately they were either exterminated or colonized. Language and race seemed inextricably tied, and the good Orient was invariably a classic period somewhere in a long-gone India, whereas the bad Orient lingered in present-day Asia, parts of North Africa, and in Islam everywhere. Aryans were confined to Europe and the ancient Orient. This makes me fucking angry. Because something that not many people know about me is that I am a direct descendant of the first Aryans from the north of India. This is Aryan, not that Hitler shit. Leon Poliakov has shown, without once remarking that Semites were not only Jews and but Muslims as well, that Aryan myth dominated historical and cultural anthropology at the expense of quote-unquote lesser people. Let me see. We still have so far to go. It is 11 minutes past midnight. Okay, I'm actually going to stop there for tonight. Because it makes sense to start with the genealogy in our next reading. So what I'm going to start doing is Friday, we will finish the chapter through the ebook during the day, my daytime, so your guys' morning. And I will do it over TikTok only, and then I will upload that to YouTube, and I can't do it on Twitch. But yeah, I will do that. I will upload it to YouTube. Because we will not get through this book in one piece. I'm going to say fare thee well to y'all on Twitch and YouTube. Take your meds, eat something, and drink water. Remember, all of you, be good to yourselves. I'm going to hang around. Hi, SB. Elsewhere. I'm going to hang around on TikTok for a little while longer. So I shall see y'all tomorrow for Pumla's book.